I knew the day was headed somewhere ugly the moment the dust started moving the wrong way at the end of my driveway, not drifting lazy like it usually does when a neighbor heads into town, but lifting thick and straight, like it had someplace important to be. I stood there longer than I needed to, coffee cooling in my hand, watching 5 white SUVs roll off the county road and line themselves up in front of my gate, neat and deliberate, polished enough to catch the morning sun like they wanted witnesses. And then, just to make sure the message landed, a flatbed eased in behind them carrying a machine that doesn't negotiate, doesn't hesitate, it just removes whatever's in the way. That was the moment I set the mug down and thought, well, looks like this morning decided who it wanted me to be. I've lived outside Red Willow most of my life. Not because it's untouched or poetic, but because it's honest. This land doesn't flatter you. It gives you heat that sticks to your skin, dust that never quite leaves your boots, long quiet afternoons where the loudest thing is your own thoughts, and work that never really ends. But if you give it enough of yourself, it gives something steadier back, a rhythm, a sense of belonging that doesn't ask for permission. My father taught me that right here at this gate, years ago, his hand resting on the post like it was alive, telling me fences aren't about paperwork, they're about memory, sweat, and respect. He used to say once you blur a line long enough, people forget it was ever there. Standing there that morning, the fence felt tight, like it already knew it was about to be tested. The first man out of the SUV had clean boots and a clipboard hugged to his chest. He smiled like someone trained to smile when resistance is expected, not warm, just practiced. He used my name without asking if he could, and launched straight into safety compliance, community alignment, future planning, words polished smooth enough to slide past common sense if you let them. I didn't interrupt. I've learned over the years that people who think they're in control will tell you everything if you just give them space. Behind him stood a woman I hadn't seen before. Perfect posture, calm eyes, expensive patience. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace but from leverage. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at my gate, measuring it, already imagining the sound it would make when it came down. As he talked, my eyes drifted past them to the pasture, the windmill turning slow, the fence line my grandfather walked with a coffee can full of nails back when this place was more sweat than structure. I remembered him telling me land doesn't belong to you just because you paid for it. It belongs to you because you showed up for it, day after day, even when nobody was watching. He was the kind of man who fixed things instead of complaining about them, who believed if you didn't take care of what was handed to you, you didn't deserve to keep it. That's the thing people miss when they show up with clipboards. They see acreage. I see mornings, broken knuckles, storms that almost took the roof, seasons that taught me patience whether I wanted it or not. 3 days earlier, I'd been walking the south pasture after a storm, tightening wire, checking posts, doing the kind of work that clears your head. That's when I saw the first marker. Bright red plastic jammed into the dirt, like a thumbtack. Then another, all lined up too straight to be coincidence. I crouched there longer than I should have, fingers in the soil, realizing someone had walked my land before sunrise and decided I wouldn't notice. That assumption didn't just irritate me, it felt personal. Like being told your memory didn't count. I followed those markers all the way to the creek bed, pulling one out, then another, laying them on the ground like evidence. I stood there listening to the water move slow and steady, thinking about how strange it is that something so quiet can outlast almost anything. I held one of those markers in my hand, light as nothing, and wondered how many decisions had already been made based on something that flimsy. How many hands had signed off on plans without ever setting foot where they pointed? I drove into town that afternoon with dust still on my boots and that familiar pressure in my chest that shows up when you already know the truth but need to see how bad it really is. The paperwork was worse than I expected. Plans filed under my name. Approvals I never gave. My signature forged just clean enough to pass if nobody cared enough to look twice. An access road marked shared use, which is the most polite way anyone has ever said you're in the way. I remember staring at those pages thinking about how easily ink tries to replace time, how quickly a place can disappear if enough people decide, It's inconvenient. The clerk behind the counter didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her eyes said she'd seen this before, seen people come in confused and leave quieter than they arrived. I asked a couple more questions anyway, already knowing I wouldn't like the answers, then walked back out into the heat feeling like the ground had shifted just enough to throw off my balance. I sat in my truck for a while before turning the key, just listening to it tick as it cooled, trying to decide what kind of man I was going to be next. That night, sleep never really arrived. Once you see the shape of something wrong, your mind won't stop tracing it. I lay there listening to the house settle, the wind moving through trees older than any plan drawn in an office. Around sunrise, a low buzzing cut through the quiet. A drone hovered over my yard. Slow and confident, camera angled just right. I didn't wave. I didn't yell. I just stood there and let whoever was watching understand I wasn't confused. By lunchtime, my face was floating around online, clipped into short videos, captions calling me unstable, armed, dangerous, comments from people who'd never met me, never stood on that land, never fixed a fence in the heat. Friends called to ask if I was okay. Others didn't call at all. It was almost impressive how fast a story can form when enough people need one to justify what they're about to do. That's when Lila called. She worked for the association. Quiet, sharp, always writing things down, rarely speaking. The kind of person who hears everything and knows exactly what not to repeat. Her voice shook when she talked. She said she'd seen contracts already signed, routes already promised, buyers already told they'd have access straight through my land. She said they were blaming her, said someone followed her when she left the office. The call cut off mid-sentence, and the silence afterward felt heavier than the words. 10 minutes later, I saw headlights swerving on County Road 6, and instinct took the wheel before logic had a chance to argue. I won't dress that part up. It wasn't heroic. It was loud, messy, metal screaming against metal, fear sharp enough to taste. When it was over, Lila sat in my truck shaking so badly she couldn't hold her phone, asking if people really did this over land. I told her yes. Especially when the land's already been sold in meetings you were never invited to. She stayed at my place that night, slept on the couch, jumped at every sound. We talked in low voices about things she'd seen, emails that vanished, meetings where decisions were made before anyone spoke. She told me about people who'd tried to push back before folks who eventually gave in because it was easier than fighting. It wasn't just my land. It was a pattern, a quiet one. The kind that keeps working because most people don't want the trouble of being labeled difficult. After that, the tone changed. Notices showed up taped to my gate, bold fonts, official seals, deadlines wrapped in polite threats. Each one tried to sound reasonable, like they were doing me a favor by warning me. I read every word once, folded them together, and burned them behind the barn. There are moments when responding just means you've accepted the rules of a game you never agreed to play. The next morning, they came back. Same SUVs, same clipboards. That machine rolled off the trailer slow and confident, like it had already been promised something. The woman with the sharp eyes spoke this time, calm and rehearsed, explaining that I was obstructing progress, that this was bigger than me, bigger than my memories, bigger than my fence. She talked about community value and long-term vision like those words outweighed a lifetime. I smiled then, not because it was funny, but because it was simple. Some people don't understand boundaries until they feel one push back. They left quicker than they arrived, dust and embarrassment tangled together behind them. That should have been the end of it. But bullies don't stop when you stand up. They stop when it starts costing them more than they planned. That night, different vehicles showed up. Darker, quieter. Men who moved like authority could be rented by the hour. They crossed my fence, believing legality was just another outfit you put on when convenient. They learned fast that private property isn't theoretical, it's real. And once you cross that line, you own what happens next. When they ran, they didn't look back. By sunrise, the sheriff stood in my yard, hat in his hands, eyes tired in a way that said he had seen this kind of thing before and wished he hadn't again. He watched the footage, listened to Lila, picked up the pieces everyone else tried to ignore, and nodded slow. This wasn't an HOA dispute anymore. This was fraud, intimidation, and arrogance stacked so high it finally tipped over. The hearing came weeks later in a room that smelled like old wood and patience. I sat there listening to my life get summarized in bullet points, watching the woman with the sharp eyes finally explain herself without a screen or a caption to hide behind. The plans, the promises, the pressure. At one point she said it was just business, like that explained everything. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Silence did the work for him. Silence and a paper trail that refused to lie. When it was done, really done, I drove home alone. Opened my gate. Listened to it creak the way it always has, the sound of something old still doing its job. The land felt different then, quieter. Like it could finally exhale. But here's the part people don't like to talk about. Winning doesn't always feel clean. The land was still mine, but something else had shifted. I'd seen how easily it almost wasn't, how close it came to disappearing behind paperwork, pressure, and a story told loud enough to drown out the truth. I noticed neighbors looking at me differently, some with relief, some with resentment, like my standing my ground forced them to ask questions they'd been avoiding. Weeks later, new signs went up down the road, advertising future homes, smiling families printed over fields that used to be quiet. Trucks rolled by slower now. People waved a little less or a little more. The world kept moving, same as it always does, and every now and then I catch myself wondering how many other gates are being measured right now, how many other people are being told, politely, that they're standing in the way of progress. I still walk that south pasture most mornings. The markers are gone. The fence is steady, but I notice things differently now. I pay attention to what people say and what they don't. I don't assume good intentions just because someone sounds professional. I understand now how quiet pressure works, how easily community can turn into a weapon if nobody questions who's holding it. I'm not telling you this because I think I'm a hero. I'm telling you because more people are realizing that ownership doesn't always protect you. That sometimes the real fight isn't loud or dramatic. It's slow. It's bureaucratic. It's someone smiling at you while they decide how much of your life they can erase without you making noise. So I want to know what you think. Was I right to push back? As hard as I did? Or did everyone lose something the moment it went that far? Where do you draw the line between defending what's yours and becoming the thing they accuse you of being? Drop your thoughts in the comments, argue if you need to. Share this with someone dealing with an HOA or a boundary dispute right now. Because these stories don't end when the gate closes, they just move on. Quietly, looking for the next place where someone assumes nobody will notice.